We struggled for a while to try to come up with a name for the series, but then we thought, what's better than voices? Because that's what you hear, that's how you express yourself, that's how you say who you are without any of us as producers stepping on you. It was merely like, here's a topic, why does it matter? Let's hear your voice. It kind of was I'm going to say the grandchild of a program we had here many, many years ago called Black Horizons, which was a weekly television series that aired a lot of the topics that were of big concern to the African-American community. It aired on WQED once a week, and it was the longest-running minority affairs show. It started shortly after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and it lasted until the early 2000s. And then it went away because we were living in a post-racial society. But then things started to change, and we realized, especially after George Floyd was killed, that there's still very much a need for alternative communities to speak about things that were important to them, which means they were important to all of us. So at the time, Pittsburgh was being really, there was lots of flag waving and real estate being sold and all kinds of things happening because we were the most livable city and everyone wanted to move here. But then the idea came up of, well, the most livable city for whom? And who would be a good person to tell this story? And not me, because, you know, love what I do, but I mean, I'm old. But there was Anne. And she knows people, and her motivations would be different from mine, and her questions would be different from mine, and her points of view and the things she would be able to elicit from the people she spoke to would be different from mine, not just because of her age, but because of also the fact that she is a young white woman with a progressive outlook who can approach this not in any kind of colonial stance or any kind of like, I feel so bad for you and I want to know how the world is treating you, but in a truly interested, educated way. And because the point of it is to educate the people who aren't here, to find out why these voices are important and to spread that intelligence and those feelings to the audience who's watching this. And so then...
I think it was important that we chose the word voices. Something that I always, because I find my interviews, I don't know how I find them, it just happens after a while. Pittsburgh is a small community, but what I really wanted for the series and what I think we've accomplished is essentially giving a voice to people who are in these videos. I always tell my interviewees, like, this isn't my project, this is your project. This is your space. I try and gather like everyday people too, so not just like the talking heads of Pittsburgh, like people who are living their everyday life and giving them a platform to voice their opinions, their thoughts, their experiences, and that's what I thought was really important about this program. And I think it's important that we talk about it today too, because as people who are like going into especially documentary work or journalism, this is a really good series about asking really difficult questions and learning how to be like very respectful, empathetic, and unbiased towards your interviewees, because they are difficult questions, and it makes me nervous sometimes because I'm asking people to tell me about some of the traumatizing aspects of their lives. Like I just did one on the prison system, so I interviewed people who were formerly incarcerated, and aspects like that, doing these kind of projects can really help you learn how to ask those difficult questions, how to put your uncomfortableness to the side, and give other people a voice and let them control the narrative.
And it's also a good way to remember how much we don't know. We approach every story thinking, oh, I know about this guy, I read about him, I'm going to have an interview with him. We have to put aside all of our assumptions when you do a show like this to figure out what it is that you don't know. And the best way to learn is from the people who are experiencing it. Ready to go? Mm-hmm. Push that button.
What I have seen in America, and specifically here in Pittsburgh, is the average white American accepts what the last 400 years has put in place.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or feelings about the video?
How important is it to you all to like end these videos on like a
For this program, this series in particular, we decided that each one had to have a message, not necessarily a message of hope, but a message that someone was fighting for change. Just a constant drumbeat of the horrors that can exist in this world will leave you hopeless. And we want you to know what's out there, but we also want you to know that there are people who are not just taking it sitting down.
Yeah, and it depends what kind of story you do, with what direction you're going for. But like, I'm interviewing these people, and the question that I ask is those questions that lend to the end. And that is how I end most of these videos, like Min said. But it's coming from like their voice. I'm not just scrambling to find like little positive bites in there. And like, even at the beginning, what Liana said, I know like every single word to this video, because that's another thing with making videos is you watch it 1,000 times and you can voice it afterwards. She said that, you know, she loves Pittsburgh, but she hates it. And that was a big part of me wanting to really get this project started, is because Pittsburgh is so problematic and it's not reported on. Like, it's always called like most livable city, but there are some positives, because people are really, there are people who are trying to make this area better. But depends what message you're going for too, what kind of project. Any like logistical questions? Because I am a producer, videographer, editor.
I have a question. So how long does it take to plan one of these projects, and do you have like a script? Like, what does your pre-production materials look like?
So I have a small team. Like I said, I'm producer, photographer, editor, and Min oversees all of my work because she is extremely talented and knows way more about the world and people than I do. It takes a really long time. It hurts your brain a lot, because how many, I think there was 6 interviewees. That's like 8 hours of interview, maybe more in this case, because there was a lot to talk about. I have a set number of questions. I usually, when I do these pieces where I'm interviewing different people, I usually ask them the same questions, because you see like how I chop it up person after person after person. It gets hard to do that if you don't ask them more questions. And then I go off of what they say, and like people like to talk, so they just keep talking. But I mean, this was like hours and hours of footage. This took a couple months because it was the first episode we did, and I was like very, very cautious. And I got it approved over and over again.
It was vetted and re-vetted, and poor Ann just submitted 9 million Vimeo cuts of it over and over, and then we would just look at it. But it was, I don't know if you can tell, there's like a lot of texture in it. She starts with Esther Bush, who was at that time the president and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh, who's like this very established figure in the civil rights movement in Pittsburgh. But then she did this whole full spectrum to these very young people who ended the video with, we're young people, we're the ones who are going to make the change. And so it's not just enough that you decide how you're going to tell the story. You need to pre-plan who the voices are that are going to tell that story, so you give it the full rainbow of all the possible answers and iterations that could come from it. So that has to be built into that timeline too, because, I mean, it's Esther Bush, so how many times a week is she going to be available to come down and sit and have a Jaziri X, same story. I mean, he's always speaking somewhere, he's always producing something, he's always teaching a class, so you might have a really prized interview, and you might hope you get that guy next week, but it might take 3 weeks to actually even get them on the phone, let alone land them. So we have weekly production meetings, and Ann would be like, we're going to need to move it another week, and we'd be like, okay. And because, you know, you want it to be the best thing it can be.
Having to interview people, like I've had to interview people at like midnight before, because that's the only thing they could do. And I'm like, well, let's do it.
And if they're silly enough to say to you, I don't have anything before 11:30, you're like, okay, like you put that out there, so now I'm going to take you up on it. Like, so sometimes you have to, you have to.
But also, like, something really important is anybody who's going into like documentary work or film is, so like Min and our whole team overviews my work. I think that is like tremendously important. You always need other eyes on your work. Like, I don't want as many as I can get, because then there'd be countless Vimeo things, but I do have like a good 3 to 4 people who overlook my work. And when you watch this video so many times when you're editing it, you just stop like noticing things that could be better. So it's crucial for people with more experience to overlook my work.
The only other thing I would say is also there's a ton of graphics, really effective, and besides being stylistically done well and having the music emphasize what's in the graphics, the actual words, the statistics, and the facts are all verifiable, and they should always be verifiable. There was a report done in 2019 about the inequities in Pittsburgh, and many of the facts that Ann used came directly from that report. And there's always important that you have an attribution page at the end, because you don't want somebody calling you out on Facebook, on YouTube, or in your face saying, like, that's crap. Where did you get that from? You can point to, it should be able to point to the actual people who tested, researched, and did the things that you're going to state as fact, or at least as a considered opinion in your piece, and make sure that you double check everything before you use it. Because you can't, despite what you may have heard, you can't argue with facts.
Yeah, I save like pages of my research, and that's another thing with these kind of projects that you don't see, is this is also like hours and hours of me researching multiple sources and making sure I'm not messing anything up. And that takes a while too, because like doing documentary work or whatever you call it, it's about like reading different sources, and you have to be like constantly educated. That's half of the whole part of the labor, is just educating yourself and reading.
Protests, images. Did you have to pre-plan that out and like participate in those, like to, because I assume obviously you weren't like, oh well, this can you guys host a protest so we can get this footage? No, obviously not. But did you like attend those to get those films?
I got lucky with this because, of course, like the protests were very, there's tons of media around at that time. So that's another thing, is I had to like search for sources who would lend me their media. And it can be difficult for us because we're nonprofit public media, so we can't pay anybody. Some of the footage was mine, probably like 30% of it was mine, but I found like verifiable sources from WESA, local photographers, just a lot of people. But then in other videos, so many of our videos at QED, we have to go out into the field and find, and we hope we get lucky.
But a situation like that's a naturally occurring event that can be spontaneous or huge and take over the entire city, you really have to beg sometimes and count on your partners. Everybody from WESA, we have a good relationship with the folks at KDKA who've been really generous with their news footage. Or some of the people that you might be interviewing would be like, oh, my friend had a camera and they were shooting the whole time, and they'll turn you on to somebody who just, they just want to be able to get their work out there. And so it's a lot of milking the crowd and finding out what you can find out.
One of our virtual students had a question. They were wondering what your favorite part of making this is. Like, what's your favorite part of making this series?
I like learning. I mean, that's a simple answer, but I really like people also. I think it's so important. And if you watch some of the other episodes, like a lot of people in this were activists, but I like hearing from everyday people. Just figuring out them and their life. I just think it's like fascinating getting to interview people. And you also like form relationships with them too, which is always nice. And they can give you more sources in the future, so.
Yeah, same thing. I like learning. I like looking at this and you might not have known anything, or you might see a protest and just think like, what are they on about this week? But this gives you like an idea of like what really matters to people, enough to drive them into the streets.
Yeah, and these projects, they like make me upset sometimes, but that's how I know like it's a good, good interviews and like good work. Like, because I have hours of footage with a lot of stuff I can't include, like very upsetting stories. So when it actually like moves me working on it, that's how I know like it's good material, I guess.
Like, how long did like the graphics with the text and the statistics like take to edit? Like, was that complicated?
We have two graphic designers here, Paula and Ryan. Ryan, I drove him crazy with this project. I made him stay up a lot. It was very intensive for him. And I like worked with him on it, and I get really picky with my graphics, but I mean, yeah, he was amazing with this project. It took him, well, I wish he was here to answer that, because I don't know if you've ever worked with After Effects, but it takes a really long time.
The other thing about Ryan is he has a vision, and he knew that the story called for big, bold graphics and letters that like ate your face, and like, you know, I don't know if you heard that there was one statistic and the numbers were climbing and there was this bass beat that came down when every number came up. Like, he's got this instinct about how to almost make it like a cartoon. Like, it almost seems like it's animated to move you beyond just saying like, oh, look, 12 million people died in childbirth. It's so bold you can't escape it. And that's another good thing about a good graphic designer. They will think about the story that they're working on and figure out, how can I portray this in a way stylistically with a font and with spacing and with tempo and adding things on.
And then you got to hit it with music too. That's like a really important part of graphics, is you get the graphics and then you got to find like that right piece and hit it at the right time when text comes up.
We're gonna go with gentrification next.
Neighborhoods adapt and change and grow.
The land has been seen as valuable, more valuable than the people.
We should be working to take the profit motive out of housing.
Being displaced anytime, whether it's justifiable or not, it's a traumatic experience.
I researched a lot for this project, and like something you don't see is, so I interviewed the interviews, but then there's a lot of people I interviewed just to talk to verify facts. People who work in like demographics in Pittsburgh, people who helped get this data, who helped explain it to me, because I don't understand the economy. So I like would talk to them just for 2 hours just to figure out how to portray this and how make sure I didn't get it wrong. Yeah, this was probably the most heavily researched piece I've ever done.
What's the decision-making process in picking out which statistics you're going to use? Sometimes you see statistics and they're like, oh, we need to work that in, or do you like find spots where you're like, we need to have a stat to back up this statement?
You'll have a conversation in the course of an interview, and somebody will say like, Black people are getting pushed out of Pittsburgh. That's all there is to it. And you think like, well, I could just take your word for it, but I wonder if there's any truth to it. And then you go to the Housing Authority, or you go to the Urban Redevelopment Authority, or you contact somebody in the Political Science Department down at the University of Pittsburgh and find out if that is indeed a fact. And we did find out that thousands of Black people left Pittsburgh in the years pre and during the pandemic because the price of housing was so outrageous they could not stay. So a lot of times that's what leads you to it. Someone will say something anecdotally and you would just say, is there any truth to it? Or often you will start the opposite direction. You'll start with a report with a lot of facts that you think like, I wonder how this is affecting people like in their homes and on their streets. And then you follow that backwards to see who's actually impacted by those sorts of things.
Usually I ask my interviewees who they know that can back up my stuff as well, and then they lead me on this like bread trail where I found more sources. And I have to like, make sure that they're verifiable sources. But something like, so somebody says, the prices of homes are skyrocketing in East Liberty. That's a bite. But then like, it's much better to show this data where you see like adjusted to 2019 dollars that people are basically making the same income that they did, but now home prices are ×3.
When do you decide to use a statistic for a sound bite versus like, because you basically have like this sort of like a statistical break where it's just like statistics, like what goes into that?
With this project, I do my rough cut. And it's also part of the process where I show it to them and they're like, nah, throw this out of here. Or like, hey, can you like find some data to back this up? Maybe include it in a statistic. And what I usually do is before I always make a list of my graphics that I need to send and I get them approved. So that helps with like rewording them. That helps sort out the ones that we want to use, the ones that we don't want to use. And A lot of it is kind of like intuition. It's being able to like read the story and what makes sense.
So the teaching artists are trying to decide whether we were going to teach the kids like to transcribe interviews.
I have to transcribe interviews. I mean, I will listen to the whole thing and I will transcribe the things that I like, because I feel like there's so much in there. I talk really quickly, and sometimes I even forget what I ask people, because I'm jamming so much into an interview. So it's important for me to go back and transcribe and figure out how they responded and what they said. But Anne, coming from an editor's point of view, has a completely different take on.
Yeah, I do this like, it's torture. I don't know why I do this, but it's just how I taught myself because I didn't go to like film school. Because I'm an editor, I put all my interviews in Premiere and I just keep chopping them up. And with these where it's people going back and forth, I grab these bites and I like put bites into sections where like, okay, this topic's on East Liberty. So I grab every bite that somebody took from a past interview and put that section in the East Liberty one, and I just keep chopping it down. I think the worst part about making documentaries, and I'm not saying like worst, the most frustrating part is you can't choose what people say. It's not like writing. So if they don't have that perfect bite to line up with somebody else's bite, I need to figure out a way to make it work. And with these where I'm going back and forth between people, it's like, that's when your editor really kicks in, because you gotta sometimes you pull something from the beginning of the section, you cut it, put some B-roll over it, and take it from the end of their sentence.
There's nothing worse than somebody who doesn't know what a sentence, what a period and a comma is for, and they just keep talking, and you're just thinking like, would a bus please go by so you'd stop talking? Because then you have to try to fashion that into like something that's concise and really definitive, and I've really spoken about this strongly in a way that I believe, and meanwhile, you left 4 more minutes on the other side of that cut, but they just wouldn't stop talking.
Framing your questions is really important. Telling the interview before time, like you don't have to like think about this, but try and talk in complete sentences because like I'm not in this video. And then if you need them to like sum things up into 2 sentences, feel free to ask that. If they don't want to, then you're just like, okay.
Recently, I've been watching some documentaries and I do like interviewing people. And to go back to what you said earlier, I just like learning about other people's lives, everyday people, just makes me feel more full, just to kind of like other stories and whatnot. So.
And it also helps you learn a little bit about yourself and what makes you feel comfortable talking to a complete stranger, because to walk into a room with some guy who runs some really important company, or a woman who's been teaching 45 kids a day and is like really passionate about what she's doing, like why should they trust you with their story? So to find a way to sit down with that person and relate with them in a level that's like non-judgmental and non-threatening and really coercive, but in a positive way, is, good conversations with your friends can be like the very first step in doing a good interview. So
with these, something that has made me a better at my job, like I'm white, and
no,
I know it's like you can barely like see me up against a white wall, but you need to be like so responsible. Like you need to put everything aside from your experience. You need to leave that at the door. And yeah, it's like I completely like shed myself before, and I get like pretty nervous sometimes. I always have to go to the bathroom before an interview just to like, when I'm gonna ask like really tough questions. Like the prison one I just did, I mean the questions were like, I've never been to prison, I've never been to jail, I got in some trouble when I was a teenager, but the questions that I asked, like I got really traumatic answers, like the worst things that could happen to people, and you have to just like learn how to empathize without like making somebody uncomfortable and leaving like your experience and your thoughts on anything.
yeah, it's all about giving them space to share with you, and trying not to insert yourself in there too much, other than in a way that, again, makes them feel comfortable sharing, but not being intrusive.
I thought like the footage on that one was like really cool, like the variety of it all. Like, did you shoot most of that for that episode?
We took cameras out in a van and drove around for 3 hours and just like broke our backs trying to find footage in Pittsburgh. And that's an example of like scavenging for footage is just, and the problem with Pittsburgh is it rains every day here, so you need to find a day where your camera won't spark and break. Half of it, so was that some of it was stock footage, like those aerials, we can't do that. We don't have, I mean, we do have a drone, but you can't fly over cities. You get like arrested. Also QED, because we've been around so long, we have a lot of footage. So I looked back through a ton of our footage, just kept looking, and just pulled some stuff. So you have to be pretty creative when you don't have like if you're working for CNN, you have a ton of resources with you, but for this kind of work, you have to like just keep finding stuff. And like this footage that I pulled, it'll be hours and hours of footage, and then I pull a 2-second bite after 2-second bites. So but it's fun too. I mean, it's sometimes I'm doing this and I'm like, why would I choose to do this? But then at the end, you're like, oh, that was really fun. Like, I'm really fortunate to be able to.
It's like a treasure hunt. Like, you just think, I'm never going to find that perfect shot of this new high-rise that you know costs $2,500 a month in East Liberty, and a lady holding her baby's hand standing at the bus stop. Like, how will I ever find that? And sometimes you just actually see it and you can point a camera at it, and then sometimes it's just there already in something that you shot when you were doing a story on the Port Authority.
I reached out to so many like organizations too, and like I would like talk to them for half an hour and then they'd give me one photo, but I could use it. So it's like, it's worth it. Like those pictures of East Liberty, I don't even know how I found them, but it took me like days to find them, but I needed them.
Photos are your friends. You can do moves on photographs. You can enlarge them. You can create a graphic with them.
I think interviews are an interesting way to look into like the human mind, like philosophical type stuff, philosophy, sort of psychology more rather. But it's like, it's interesting to see, you talked about traumatic experiences specifically. It's like, it's interesting to see how some people can even stay calm talking about these things when obviously it has a lot of people have PTSD from these things because they associate these like traumatic experiences with like things happening today. It's like, when you talk about those, especially in voices, it's like these people are extremely passionate about what they talk about, and it seems like, lots of them have experienced this thing firsthand, injustices and such, and it's interesting to see, I guess, people's thoughts on a topic like that.
That's why I want to watch the prison one, to show you guys an example of something like, it answers that question pretty much. It's like, it answers the question of like, how do you ask people about like the worst moments in their life.
But you also feel humbled in a way that they trusted you enough to share something that's obviously like, it's deeply troubling to them, or maybe it evokes a memory that they thought they weren't going to have to talk about when they sat down there and talked with you. So it shows a certain measure of respect for who you are and the way you've approached the subject. So, yeah.
Yeah, and when you stay unbiased, like with your interviews, you can find like beauty in every interview, almost. But but yeah, I've like my interviewees, like I learn so much from them, and humans are very resilient. With this project, it's like these people want other people to know like how messed up this system is. Like they lived it and we don't talk about it, and they were like, I want people to know like what this put me through, I made mistakes, but like this is wrong and I want to share my story. That's probably one of my favorite pieces I've worked on. And there's like so much I couldn't include in that one because it would be too graphic, and I think that for like what we were going for, some of it would have been way too graphic, and I think it would have like devalued some of the story.
Because there's a line between interesting and sensationalizing. Yeah. I do want to just say one thing about Ann's visual style choice in that one. She shot that in what is called black limbo. and you guys are working in the studios downstairs, which gives you a perfect opportunity to try that. It's a huge open space where you just basically light the subject and nothing else around it reflects any light, as opposed to the other ones that had a warmer, more communicative feeling where they were sitting on chairs, or they were sitting in their offices, or they were sitting in their homes. So where you choose to shoot those interviews can say a lot about what it is that you want to elicit as far as the emotional response from your audience and the kind of responses you want from your subject.
What was the stylistic thinking behind the black limbo? Because that stood out to me immediately before you had to mention it.
I just kind of liked it. It's person after person. You're not paying attention to the background. You're only paying attention to them. The lighting can be pretty cool. We do pepper light, which is a small light behind them, so it gives them that halo effect that I really like.
Other thing about Ann's shooting style on this one in particular, it was fairly close up, and you could see the texture in people's faces. You could see their hair, you could see their eye color very, very clearly, and everything just serves to humanize them more. Sometimes if you get too close to a person, you're like, but in this context, it just helped to make their stories more relevant.
Yeah, a wide shot, if somebody's doing hand movements, a wide shot's really nice for that because talking with your hands is almost just as effective. But if somebody's saying something really impactful and emotional, I usually go to a close up because that hammers it home that pay attention to this part.
For this one that you just did, how do you decide to not tell the super hard truth?
I was thinking about that when we were watching it. It's because I developed a relationship with these people. I talked to them a lot and afterwards. So it is intuitive. Also so you know how it kind of had a happy ending? I was thinking about that and honestly I think that honored them. I couldn't have not done this with all their achievements at the end because they're just really strong people. It's intuitive. I just think adding those really gruesome details in this, it's almost like clickbait, and I don't like that.
And also, it's sometimes when people are sharing something so intimate with you, they're caught up in the flow of the story that they're telling you, and they may not even realize that they've told you something really formidable.
Also, showing your work to other people, because you might be so attached to these bites, and then they're no, and you see it a different way. So, I always could have, for this, I could have told some of the more rough stories, but I just didn't think that, I think they were sad enough already. Yeah.
And I think you did a really good job also of concentrating on their strengths. They endured all these things that we didn't have to hear all of the really awful, horrible, but that they came out of this not just feeling whole, but wanting to help other people. I think that's the biggest takeaway, that the people who endured something like this can not just rise above, but do more for people who are behind them. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, Lee.